Yes, to some people's amazement this might be a quite surprise and something that is hard to understand. But the reality is probably different than you think, and this is a topic that nobody talks about. Hello everyone, here is your favorite speculator, millionaire, the biggest video game hater, and today we are going to have a fair discussion why Valorant killed CSGO. Do you want to open some cases in CS2? Then wait a minute, I have an offer for you. Because on Keydrop you have a large number of cases to choose from with better drops than in game by itself, where you can also clearly see the odds. And you can get also 10% deposit bonus plus $0.5 for free when you enter the code AFKo, or just check out the link down below in the description where you can also get the bonus. Plus you can upgrade your skin in this upgrade feature, or you can play against other players to win more skins. Also, I got a little bonus for you, which is $50 giveaway for you waiting in the comments down below, so enjoy and don't forget to use code AFKo. Before we find out why Valorant killed Counter-Strike Global Offensive, we need to find out and take a look back at the moment when the Valorant came out, so we can understand it all properly. Grab some popcorn or something good, sit back, because this is going to be very interesting. So what do we start with? As a game, Valorant didn't start out as its best. In fact, the first concepts were pretty goofy at the moment, and yet it didn't seem like anything could topple a giant like Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Except here was one small problem. Ever since the game release, or rather the official beta, Valorant managed to take quite a beating in the early days. The game actually looked much better than what we could see before, and everyone was afraid, or rather predicted, that this game would really kill the Counter-Strike series.
I'm here to answer the question, is Valorant gonna kill CSGO?
And they really had the reason to be, because the company behind the game was Riot Games, and they were really famous about their regular updates in the game like League of Legends, where on the other hand the Valve, the company which is behind the Counter-Strike who didn't know, releases updates very rarely. This has been a really hot topic, and let's see how many of you have at least tried Valorant despite being Counter-Strike players. Let me know down below in the comments. My guess is that all of you at least were a little bit intrigued about the new game. So what new stuff Valorant did bring to the market? This new game just first looked like it's just a cartoonish imitation of Counter-Strike, which logically wasn't, because if it really was, I don't think it would have ever had the success which it was experienced. And that's why the developers have to came up with something really new. Valorant brought new concepts to the game market, and even though it took many things from Counter-Strike, it implemented new gameplay elements that were never seen before and influenced the game by itself in a big way. For example, we can compare the explosion of a spike and the bomb in Counter-Strike. The spike explodes in a completely different way and insta-kills you in this radius, where on the other hand the bomb in Counter-Strike only takes damage and almost everywhere on the map. There were some new features and the mechanics to the game that caught the attention of most players of the player base. Aside from the new use of the new abilities, it also could have been this new improved buy menu, where you can clearly see how much money you would have for the next round, and you can also buy for your teammates weapons if they are needed. Another thing that players very enjoyed was this pure dopamine thing. It was this animation. Every time you eliminate an enemy, it gave you this satisfying animation. So we have a new, functional and interesting game. Now we just need to attract new players and make bigger player base than Counter-Strike has. Boom! Valorant made adjustments in terms of gameplay. For example, shooting by itself was much easier in Valorant than in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Movement that players practice 24/7 in Counter-Strike didn't play as much of a role in Valorant because your character didn't speed up based on how you moved. Bunny hop and other mechanics were completely gone. Or imagine how many lineups you had to know as a Counter-Strike Global Offensive player. Here you just use the ability, you open this kind of window where you can click smokes without knowing how to throw them exactly, and boom, you have a complete execute. That doesn't mean that there are no lineups in Valorant, but you probably get my point. It was clear that the Valorant gameplay was very different from Counter-Strike, and its main skill-based aspect was its abilities. One of the biggest YouTubers in Counter-Strike, Warowell, made a video on this topic, comparing the two games at release, and this is how he compared the two games.
Valorant and Counter-Strike feel like the exact same game, but when you drill down into the details, you find a much simpler and more organized game in Valorant. It also feels a lot easier to play than Counter-Strike. I think it can be best summed up as Valorant is Counter-Strike on easy mode with abilities.
Valorant was overall designed for a more and broader audience and not for the competitive and sweaty players like we used to have in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So that's why there is such a big problem here. The new Valorant game grew, had all the features that Csgo didn't have, anti-cheat, frequent updates, releases, etc. And it was easier for people to play Valorant where they didn't have to try and grind all the stuff which was needed in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. But eventually something came along that perhaps no one expected, which was Counter-Strike Global Offensive finally got a redesign and the release of Counter-Strike 2.
It's over, Bess!
We got a brighter and visually prettier game, new smokes or maybe even lags. But there was also some new features that seemed to hint at Valorant. For example, it could have been this bottom feature where it gives you an animation and sound effect every time you eliminate an enemy. A similar buy menu like Valorant has, with ability to sell weapons and utilities if you have already bought them. Or straight up the modifying the game rounds from MR15 to MR12. So it was clear to see where the developers got their inspiration from, but on the other hand, the players seemed like they didn't care that much. They were just simply happy that after so many years, something started to happen with their favorite game again, and for a while there was a hope that Valve could do something again. And finally, when the Counter-Strike 2 was officially released, where everyone had access, it simply meant that our favorite CSGO had to end for good. Okay, AFKo, but what are you talking about, bro? What do you mean that Valorant killed CSGO? Well, you know, if we all think about it, Counter-Strike 2 is logically not what Counter-Strike Global Offensive used to be. Now when I try to turn Counter-Strike again, it's mega refreshing and the aim with the movement are things that are just simply missing in the new version of Counter-Strike 2. When Valorant firstly came out on the market, it just simply showed a new direction for how FPS game can be evolved in future and how to attract a wider audience that doesn't care so much about all those hours of grind to learn all the mechanics. And Counter-Strike 2 has visibly learned from their mistake, where they also trying to make the game more casual and friendly for the beginners. Just take a look at the latest updates that Valve were doing. Instead of improving movement or shooting to be similar from CSGO, they are adding this new spot where you can plant the bomb, so a new beginner can understand where exactly he can plant the bomb. This new crosshair for the smoke. Fun fact, if you wanted to hit this one before, you had to make a specific config for it, which was much harder, and so many new stuff that this game just makes much more easier. I mean, there is definitely nothing wrong about it. I mean, it makes sense. Sure, Counter-Strike will continuously grow, more players and therefore more money in Valve's pockets. But there is one huge thing, that Counter-Strike would have never been the same as we know it from now, if Valorant would never came out. In fact, the modern trend that this game showed us changed the Counter-Strike for good. Everyone wanted Counter-Strike 2 to be an improved version of Global Offensive, which we apparently got, but it turned out to be a slightly different game that we expected. Why visually it was so good, but on the other hand it was much easier to play than it was ever before. And that simplicity of Valorant just simply killed the difficulty of Counter-Strike Global Offensive and the game itself, which is why the Counter-Strike 2 was originally made. What happens next nobody knows, only time will tell, and let's see what the developers want to do in future with Counter-Strike 2. But that won't change the fact that the Counter-Strike Global Offensive will never be here again.